So what is the Easter story all about? Well, it all started a long time ago. No, that's not right. A long time ago is pretty subjective. A long time ago for you might be when Nelson Mandela was released from Robben Island, or when the Beatles broke up, or Wellington defeated Napoleon, or the Roman Empire collapsed, or the Egyptian pyramids were built. But none of them is long ago in the biblical scale of things. In the biblical scale, there is no long ago, there is only forever. God has existed forever. Not a million years, a billion years, a trillion years, not even a Googleplex years. These timescales are simply drops in the ocean to God. He has been around forever and will be around forever. And you can join him forever if you do as he says. Here's God, at least a common representation of God. He's a wise old man. Not really, of course. He has always looked exactly like that. His grey hair has always been grey. He didn't have to grow a beard. He has always had a beard. Those wrinkles of wisdom have eternally been just as they appear here. God is not wise. Wisdom is learnt. God is omniscient. God never learnt anything. God has known everything forever. And God never gets bored, which you might find hard to comprehend. He has nothing to look forward to because he knows everything that was, is, and will be, and he cannot be surprised by anything for exactly that same reason. Now, having existed for an eternity, God decided to construct hell. Well, obviously he didn't decide to, because that would require a change of mind, which is a change of state, and God is unchanging. So God had always known that after an infinite amount of time, he would create a place of eternal torture as his first creation that we know of. It's not for us to question why he created hell first. He just did. He is and always has been an all-loving God. Though what he had to love for eternity when nothing existed but him is not easy to understand. Himself, perhaps? Anyway, sometime after creating hell, we don't know how long, but when considering forever, it doesn't matter whether it was a billion, trillion years or half a nanosecond. And time only exists within our universe, whilst heaven and hell exist outside our universe. So when is a meaningless concept here. But whilst time has no meaning to God, and when has no meaning, after apparently does, because God still creates things in temporal order. So after God created hell, he created angels, because having existed forever, unchanging and perfect, incapable of being bored, incapable of being surprised, he decided, well obviously again he didn't decide, he had always known, that after an infinite amount of time he would create hell and then angels, though he had no requirement for either, because he was complete. Now the angels didn't like him. Though he is perfect and all-loving and all-powerful and all-just, and though heaven is a more perfect place than we are capable of imagining, the angels, which he had created, did not like it, just as, we must assume, he knew they would not. Despite knowing God was omnipotent and that they would face certain and unending pain, suffering and torment if they went against his word, the angels apparently preferred this to spending another second in God's presence. And though God knew their every thought and deed, they somehow managed to conspire against him and to challenge him, as he knew they would. God gave them a chance. He explained the consequences of their actions. We must assume that some backed down, but fully 1/3 chose eternal, unendurable torture in the fires of hell rather than spend another day in heaven. It was that bad. The heaven which we must all aspire to as an act of faith. So some more time passed, or did not, and God created the universe of time and space which we know. He created as many stars as there are grains of sand on every beach and in every desert on earth. He created enough planets to vastly outnumber those stars, and comets, asteroids, dust clouds, black holes, etc., etc. And on just one of those planets he created life, and then he created a man. The man felt lonely. God had always known that the man would feel lonely, because God knows what it feels like to be lonely, even though he has never felt lonely. And so he put the man to sleep and removed one of his ribs and used that rib to create a woman, just as he had always planned to do. God had made the man with a spare rib, specifically so that when the man complained of being alone, that rib could be taken out and used to make a woman. But no sooner had God created man and woman than they disobeyed him. They succumbed to the delicious temptation which God placed right in front of them, because they were fooled by an angel much wiser and guileful than they in their innocence could ever have hoped to defend against, and which God had allowed into the garden. So in the garden God had created, by the angel God had created, with the fruit God had created, the man and woman God had created, with the minds that God had created, were tempted just as God had known they would be. And for this sin of disobedience, which God had always known they would commit, they were punished, banished, and their generations damned in perpetuity. Their descendants continued to be human, just as God had designed them to be, rather than angelic as God demanded of them. Well, angelic as in the non-rebellious type of angelic, of course. And so, shortly after, all time is shortly after when measured against eternity, God destroyed all life on the earth for the sins of mankind, because human nature was mankind's fault and not God's. But even this did not work, as God knew it wouldn't, because humans kept on being human, just as God had designed them, despite him having punished them and banished them and damned them in perpetuity. So God visited earth, as he always had planned to. He ignored the might of the empire which had brought Pax Romana to much of the world. He ignored the flourishing Oriental and Indian civilizations and those of the New World, and instead met up with a few tradesmen in an obscure fishing village in the Middle East. God did not tell them who he was. He did not explain anything clearly to them. In fact, he left them scratching their heads when he had gone, because his sole purpose for coming to earth was to pray to himself and get himself killed as a sacrifice to himself, to lift the curse which he himself had imposed on mankind for falling into a trap of sin which he had set in the Garden of Eden. And having lifted the burden of guilt from all mankind, God went back to heaven, as he had always planned to, and promised to return to earth within a generation, which he never did. And that was 2,000 years ago, which doesn't quite explain why we are all still born guilty sinners. But at least the Easter eggs taste nice.